Hello everyone and welcome to our very exciting session of Facebook Live. In a moment we're going to be joining Kathleen and Terry. They were the ones who did the lovely video that we watched. But first, before we go over to there, Susanette's here and we've got a couple of questions about how things are going to be changing at Croydon Vision next week. So I'm just going to let Susanette come and join us.
Hello! Who do we have in, Ola? Ola is kindly doing comments. Who do we have so I can say hello to them?
We've got Ines and Maxine.
Okay, and obviously others are joining us. Right, thank you for inviting me, Catherine. Hello to everyone, and Kathleen as well, and Terry, your very interesting video, which we're going to talk about later on. But obviously, as you're all aware, we had the government briefing yesterday. Ola is talking, and are you alright?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we had the announcement yesterday with regards to the group of 6, and I kind of went in and had a listen to the whole speech of Boris, bless his heart.
Well done.
So just to kind of understand where we're at and how we can support our members and continue to support our members. So I'm pleased to inform you that we are a COVID secured organization, which means that we can still continue to provide services for you guys. And so all we're doing is about adapting it a little bit. So instead, we already had a booking system, so anyone coming in will book in advance. So that's part of the track and trace that they're talking about. So we're already doing that anyway. We were just going to amend whereby where there were 7 people that could be in a room, we're going to make it now a 6. So members will need to book in advance to make sure that they get their spot, and if they don't, then come into another day, and we can be flexible as best as we can. Obviously we have Ola and Catherine who are teching you guys up to make sure that you can join us via Zoom or Facebook in anything that we're doing, especially our upcoming AGM, which is going to be the 9th of October. Yeah, so I thought just to kind of give a quick brief to say we are open for business. Please don't be deterred of not coming out. Please do. Your well-being is so important to us. So please come out. There's food as we do regularly. We're just adapting again to that process where if there's more than 6 people, we'll divide the hall and make sure that we adhere to the conditions and remain adaptable. Yeah?
There's one question. Does this affect outreach?
No, it doesn't, because it's the case of 2 households. So if there's a household, there's one. Yeah, so if you are doing outreach, that should be fine. We obviously, being a COVID secure business means that our PPE is in place, hygiene is heightened, and all the necessary social distancing measures. So it's all in place, and yeah, thank God we've been safe, and we will continue to be safe. So no, it doesn't. It's business is as usual. It's just adapted.
Okay, I think that was the only questions I've had from members recently. I don't know if Ola's had any come through on Facebook. So thank you very much for joining
No one wants to talk to me. There's a whole Terry who is a character of himself
do you know
now.
Something?
I'm
we
only
could sit
winding
here for an hour and you would have lots of questions, Susanette.
That's fine. Anyway, thank you. Enjoy the session, and I'm going to go upstairs and listen in as well. And because there's some really interesting questions which would be great to get answers about. All right, thank you guys.
Thank you,
Have a
Susanette.
lovely session.
Just going to scoot back into the chair over here. So as both Susanette and I said, we are going to go and have a chat with Kathleen and Terry. Terry is the artist from the film The Terry Fragments, and Kathleen is the person who arranged it and filmed it, and I'm sure both of them will be able to tell you far better about what's happened. So I'm just going to pop a headphone on so I can hear Kathleen and Terry talk to me, and I am going to go over to them. Terry's having a few technical issues, as you do when you do this sort of thing. So his webcam isn't working, but he is definitely going to be here in voice. And please type any of your comments and Ola will let me know. I've also got some previous questions and we'll pass them over. So I'm just going to change the view and we are now with you, Catalin.
Okay. Hello, can you hear me?
It takes about 10 seconds for us to get a response, so I can hear you.
Okay.
If I suddenly go, we haven't heard any of that, we'll just start again.
It's like being in space. Okay.
It is a bit like that, yeah.
Hi, welcome. And first of all, thank you so much to Susanette and Catherine for providing me with this platform to talk about my work. So my name is Catalin Brilla. I'm a lecturer at Bournemouth University. And many thanks for attending today's session about my film, The Terry Fragments. And thank you very much to the people also who filled in the pre-event questionnaire. It's very useful for my research. I'm briefly going to switch my screen to a PowerPoint presentation.
Okay.
So that should be on now.
Yeah, we can see your PowerPoint presentation.
Great. So I just want to talk a bit about my my research as a kind of framing for this discussion about the film. So as a researcher and a filmmaker, my work tries to reduce the stigma of marginalized social groups through representations that bypass the usual stereotypes we see or hear in mainstream media. And I've done this with a feature documentary about Muslim women playing football in Zanzibar. And for the past 8 years, I've been working on this project about blindness, which has produced 4 feature documentaries. So the one you have watched or listened to, The Terry Fragments, and then there's another one called June's Patchwork, and a third one about Baluji, who is an Indian sitar player. And as I will say at the end, there's another version of Terry's film that focuses on the painting process only. Now, the aim is to organize screenings, discussions, and surveys, and trying to reduce the social stigma around disability, especially blindness. And my research addresses several of the United Nations development goals, such as good health and well-being, reduction of social inequalities, and sustainable communities. And this is why it's very important for me to gather all this data through questionnaires and interviews. Now, media stereotypes of disability can lead to prejudice and negative behavior towards people with disabilities. So this kind of social stigma starts with representations in mass media, film, television, the press, literature, radio, and so forth. And this is because the majority of people draw their knowledge about visually impaired people through such media, unless, of course, they have close first-hand experience of blind people. So in terms of narrative stereotypes of blindness, films often depict 2 types of characters, the supercrip and the tragic hero. The supercrip seems to achieve the impossible. So for example, when a blind mountain climber or a photographer achieves the seemingly impossible, and this kind of motif generates fascination and inspiration in the audience. And on the other hand, the tragic hero is socially isolated and suffers from or is traumatized as an effect of the disability. And this motif usually is supposed to generate pity and anxiety in the audience. And this is not to say that these depictions are right or wrong, but such stories reduce characters to their disability only and squeeze them into particular story patterns that display otherness and reinforce this binary opposites between us, the seeing people, and them, the blind people. And this is really an issue with stereotypes in general. What's interesting also that through my research, I noticed that stereotypes of blindness also exist in aesthetics. So if you see or listen to any films about blindness, the blindness is usually represented as a spectacle. And the most common aesthetic motifs are extreme close-ups of body parts, of noses, fingers, ears, which of course makes the space very abstract. And we don't really get to know the character through that, only through body parts. Then we have the metaphor of light and dark, which reinforces the blind versus non-blind binary I mentioned before, and a lot of experimental visuals that imply some kind of sense of abnormality. And very often these filmmakers, they're trying to be artistic and to represent the point of view of blind people by doing that. But from a social cognition point of view, it really backfires because it others the character on screen. So in my films, I'm trying to break such stereotypes by focusing on the everyday life of the character from their own perspective, which is why the structure of the film you've watched is quite fragmented, so that there's no kind of stereotypizations through the narrative formulas I mentioned before. I'm very interested in everyday life because everyday life is not as simple as and close-ended as film narratives usually are, which is one reason why I didn't show the finished painting in the film, which is maybe something we can talk about afterwards. Now, very briefly, in terms of my target audiences, I target 5 different audiences, and we have different aims for each audience. So the first audience is visual impairment groups, and we want them to become aware of the stigma of media representations and the threat of stereotypes, and maybe also empower people to take up arts or crafts. The second group is clinical organizations, which is all about increasing the empathy towards the patient's voice in clinicians or therapists or rehab workers. The third one is research organizations, for example, universities, psychology departments, medicine, media studies, where areas for further research can be pinned down. The fourth one is media practitioners like myself, filmmakers, producers, commissioning editors, so that they understand more about the representation of disability on screen, and they are using their craft in a way that breaks stereotypes. And I'm currently collaborating with the British Film Institute to achieve that with major broadcasters like the BBC and Channel 4, for instance. And finally is the general public, which is supposed to watch these films and reconfigure their stereotypes about blindness, which hopefully leads to the reduction of social stigma. And then at the end of this session, after our discussion, I will also send through Catherine a link to a questionnaire that I would ask you to fill in, which is questions about after you watch the film or listen to the film. And I will also send a link with more about my own work. So I think this kind of puts my work in a nutshell, and maybe we can start the discussion now.
Yeah, I'm just going to swap, because it hasn't gone back to you, to a different screen, but we will join you. There we are. We can see you again now, Kathleen.
Okay, I'll stop sharing the screen now.
Yeah. So just one of the comments we had from members was it was a really good film, and it showed the struggle of sight loss, but someone said it would be really nice to see more of the journey that Terry went through in overcoming and adapting, because I'm sure, Terry, you didn't go overnight from not doing art to doing art the way you did. That was just a comment from one of our viewers. And this sort of comes, I'm going to ask Caitlin the question first, and then I'd like to see Terry's answer. So what were your expectations before the video, and were they met once you finished filming? So that's to you, Caitlin.
Sure. Let me first refer to the first comment you had about showing the process. I think that's a very important one, because the film is only 48 minutes long.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to squeeze in a lot of things into the film. And whilst I was trying to be very eclectic about all the many different aspects of Terry's life, I was purposefully not placing too much emphasis on the journey of becoming blind and hone his art, because I wanted to create an everyday life portrait of Terry that is not only focused on disability or painting, but on many different aspects. So basically, I didn't want to reduce Terry to a painter only, or to a blind person.
Yeah, that makes sense.
In terms of the expectations, I had expectations with regards to the stereotypes I mentioned before, which comes out of my research, and I'm confirming now the expectations by doing all these screenings and questionnaires with different target groups. So our next target will be clinicians, and so far whether people like the film or not, they had this experience of an everyday life person that is not reduced to disability. So that expectation has been met.
Okay.
Our expectations haven't been met, but maybe that's something we can discuss later.
So Terry, what were your expectations when Kathleen asked to do this film about you?
That he would be able, that he or the film or both would be able to give over a good representation of what pain and suffering is like and overcoming the both. Something like that.
Okay, and do you feel that the video did that?
The most recent one.
Okay,
In parts.
In parts, yeah. And sort of, I think you've actually answered a lot of our next question, which was a lot of us came away from the video, even reading beforehand the idea about it, with a feeling that we'd missed something about why the video was created. But I think your explanation has really helped today. Thank you very much for that, Kathleen. And the other question was, why did you pick Terry?
Why not?
I know it's a why not question, Terry. I just...
Who else? Fill the space.
Yeah.
So,
Just an insight into your process when you... Was it just a blind page to Google, or...?
it's not far off. So in 2000, it's not... In 2004, I contacted the RNID because I wanted to make a film about the blind painter, and they kindly put me in touch with Terry. And
Kindly?
kindly, very kindly. And Terry and I clicked so well.
What?
There was a very interesting dynamic between us. So I made a film about me in 2004, which I came to believe that it's very stereotypical, and then I made this longer film after a lot of research trying to break stereotypes. So I've known Terry, we've known each other since 2004.
It doesn't seem a day too long.
I'm sure, Terry, I'm sure.
Yeah, sure it does. I'm counting the days.
So it was really by coincidence, and it was because I wanted to make a film about a blind painter.
Okay, I just had a question come through, and this is for you, Kathleen. What is the reception to your work? And it's sort of the initial reception when you ask someone to watch the video. I don't know if you've had that feedback.
Yes, because when we screen the films, I obviously look at the reactions of people as well, and then I get the questionnaires. It really depends on the target audiences. So if you make a film like this that tries to break social stigma, it's very important that you segmentize the audience.
Yeah.
And you get different reactions from everyone. So for example, from academics or clinicians, you get reactions that are far more focused on embodied experiences or things like that, movement. From blind participants, you get reactions that are, for example, like, how can I take up painting, or asking about the painting process more. From people like Terry, I get reactions that, why don't you show my finished painting for me? we
all want to see it here at Croydon Vision, or experience it.
Yes, no, that would be great. And so it really depends on the different audiences.
Okay, and this is a question for you, Terry. As we are a visually impaired organisation, one of the top questions was, what is your eye condition, and how did that affect how you changed and thought about painting?
Eye condition is detached retinas and optic atrophy.
Ooh. So was that a progressive process, or did it happen overnight?
One retina went overnight, and over the next few years, one followed the other.
Okay.
And it all culminated in death, really, of the eye.
Of the eye? You're still very much with us, Terry.
I heard that, Kathleen. Never mind.
I'm here.
Yeah, sure, worse luck.
And the other one is, do you use your experience to help others? Because we're very much about empowerment here at Croydon Vision.
I have tried to, yes, mainly in email, by email, but I have done physical, actual contact with other people.
Oh, that's lovely to hear.
Like, can't remember this, Liberty somebody other in Trafalgar Square a few years ago.
Wow.
Schools, and mainly, as I say, it's worldwide via email. People have become interested in seeing such terrible videos that there are available, and have become interested in how I manage and how they could, take up the art that they feel they have inside them.
So I think
process of getting it out there, getting out what you feel in some kind of form.
brilliant. I think you sort of answered a question that was going around the office this morning, which is, do you create art for yourself or for the person who is experiencing the art, Terry?
For
You.
me, it's getting what I've got inside me out
Out.
there. And if somebody likes it and feels the same and can see what I'm trying to do, that's fine.
And then sort of the next question,
Pardon me.
probably I'll ask you, Terry, first. Do you think that we should experience the work of art the same way that you do? So, for instance,
When you
should we,
say
we, the sighted population, or everyone who's looking at your artwork, whether it be someone who's sighted or someone who isn't, should we experience it in the realm of touch instead of in the realm of sight?
That's a difficult one.
It is a difficult one.
It was created physically by touch, but emotionally by sight, i.e.
Okay.
memory. Difficult one to do that.
Because I notice you always paint your pieces. Is that a habit, or just you don't feel it's finished if there isn't some paint on it?
Well, I've tried other media.
Yeah.
But I like paint seems to work the best.
Okay.
Pardon me. And with plasticine on its own, or what I plasticine substitute, would feel or seem to be dull. Whereas using paint as well, I can apply varnish to it and it would bring out some kind of, high finish.
Okay, that's really interesting.
So rather than looking dull, would have give it some life, give the thing some life, so to speak.
Thank you very much for that, Terry. And sort of from you, Kathleen, do you think that the public should experience the work the same way as the artist does?
Well, I think that's impossible anyway. Even people who will watch my films won't experience it in the same way as I envisaged it. So I think what I was trying to do is to mediate or translate Terry's experience to a wider audience rather than trying to simulate it or emulate it. And filmmaking is all about it, or any kind of medium is about it. You distort, you translate, you mediate, and this is where representation comes into the force. I was trying to create a film for a general public and these other target audiences, and I didn't attempt to translate Terry's experience one-to-one because I think it's impossible anyway for any human being to do it.
So this was probably more of a Kathleen question. Do you feel that the social stigma of visual impairment is still the same for people after they've watched the film?
I think it depends on how strong the preconceptions are, and there may be a shred of awareness after watching the film, but ultimately there need to be more films that break the stigma. So it's not just about one film and one filmmaker. Hopefully this will trigger more filmmakers to make films that try to break the stigma, not necessarily in the same way, but being more aware of the social stigma. So no, I think the audience needs to be cultivated with a body of films. One film isn't really enough.
Yeah. And Terry, this is a question for you. You come across as incredibly capable. So how did you get to that point in your life? Was it a long process? Did you have lots of people supporting you?
No, not until recently. There is just a long, hard struggle against total despair and desperation. It was either that or give up totally.
So just keep ploughing on. Is that your advice if you're in that stage?
if you've got it in you, get it out there. Otherwise, you drive yourself crazy. trying to find an avenue in which to escape. It's just keep going. You'll find a way around every which way.
So you're an incredibly you persevere so much from the sound of it.
The case of having to, otherwise you go crazy. Sometimes, it's not a joke, it's real.
I know it's real. So I think, Kathleen.
Sorry, I hope I wasn't being insensitive there.
No, not at all. That's we want these real, honest answers. Thank you very much, Terry.
I think also what I would like to mention is that I have another film version where you can see or listen to every painting stage of the painting process, and this really shows the perseverance of from the very beginning, from the empty canvas to the absolute finished painting on the wall.
Oh wow!
So I think maybe that's something that can be shown or distributed another time.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. So, Kathleen, do you plan to make any more films?
Yes. Of course, Terry can't get rid of me so easily.
And how do you feel about that, Terry?
Yes, please. Even if it's him, yes, please.
So, Terry, what gave you the idea of using Plasticine to enable you to paint?
It's the only thing I've found since years ago. I tried string, bits of this, gone into sculpture, didn't get out what I got inside me, and I suddenly thought, looking around, what can I use, what malleable, what would be tactile and things like that, and I thought of, it used to be kiddies Plasticine, so I went around looking at various art shops and came away with this new Plast. That's its name.
And I noticed that you label all your Plasticine with Braille. Or try to. I noticed that you picked up one and read black. Do you do the same with your paints?
I do, most of them, yes.
And I think it was your wife was mixing up a colour for you. Is that when you want an exact colour?
As best as we can, yes. Yeah.
So trying to get, again, that thought in your head out.
Yeah, what's in there, I'll try as best as I can to be representational. I mean, I could be weird, symbolist, expressionist if I wanted to be. But I wouldn't be true to myself.
You've got to be true to that idea you've got in your head and get it out on the paper, so to speak.
As best I can, unless it's a total I want it to be like. I mean, the thing in Kathleen's film is a symbolic portrayal of a woman's figure. It's not real. I could make it more realistic, but it'll do. It symbolises things. But that's okay with me. That's the way it started out to be.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I try to be as realistic as I can. And that's why the use of Plasticine helps me to create all this tactile imagery. Best thing I've come across.
Brilliant. And I think from what you've said, you've had sight in the past.
Yes.
So has the memory of sight, or how has the memory of sight influenced your painting?
Say that again. How did the memory
of sight influence your painting in general?
How did the memory of sight?
Yeah. So is it the knowledge? Is it colours, shapes, objects? If you know you're doing a mountain, you'll go for a certain shape, for instance.
It's not the memory of sight. It's just the memory, really.
I think the memory, the sighted memory, I think is the way.
More place than anything else.
Okay.
Sense of place, because I'm doing that as I'm speaking now. Sense of place, knowing where I want to be, where I should be.
Yeah.
It's just a memory of things and places I were that I remember, and anything that can spark off those memories. Well, it's not really down to sight. It's more memory, which. Whatever memory really is.
Yeah.
No one's ever explained it to me.
Oh, that's a big question. Let's not try and answer that one, Terry.
Sure, right.
And one of the things I just want to pass on, our members have been saying they would never have thought of using Plasticine.
No, me neither.
It was that sort of An
tried
11th hour.
Yeah, yeah. Nearest I got was blue tack, but even that didn't work until I came across this plasticine substitute, so to speak.
Yeah.
A real eye-opener.
And Catalin,
One.
sorry, how do you think, I don't know if you'll know the answer, but how do you think we could get more visually impaired people involved in the arts? Is that part of the breaking down the social stigma of if you're visually impaired, you can't be an artist?
I think this is one of them, because through the social stigma, or this kind of social stigma permeates stakeholders like art schools, for instance, which is a real issue. But then at the same time, organizations like Croydon Vision also has a lot of power to enable people through showing them case studies like this, for instance. And I think it's all by seeing and doing, or listening and doing, and seeing examples, more examples. Because in media, we don't see a lot of empowered blind people. It's mostly people who are isolated at home or don't do anything.
And we all need to get involved in changing that, don't we?
Yes.
Because just because you're visually impaired, you're still a person and fully capable. That's very much, we want everyone to get the most out of what they want to do. We do have an art group down in the basement here at Croydon Vision. So, and that's... so, Terry, you used Plasticine. Do you know how long that lasts for?
How do you mean lasts for?
Well,
Shelf for.
Well, Plasticine seems a very... you touch it and it changes shape again. So does the paint help it set? Or do you have to still be quite careful about it?
I think maybe, Terry, you can talk about how at the beginning your paintings fell a bit apart and then you found a technique to keep them together.
Yeah, that would help. How did you do that, Terry?
Which bit? I don't know.
Where the plasticine doesn't fall off anymore of the paintings.
So,
what are you really asking?
So how do you achieve the plasticine staying in place and not falling off?
Right. Okay. After an initial sketch, I just give out a wash of paint, which will hold it in place, hopefully.
Yeah.
Then build up from there.
Okay, so you've laid your plasticine out and then you do a wash of paint over that. Is that right?
And
that's sort of.
I use thin, very thin lines of plasticine.
Yeah.
Which I use as lines drawn by a pencil.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Draw the sketch out with lines of plasticine and press them into the board. I use a canvas board rather than actual canvas. When I'm satisfied, I go over it with a wash of acrylic paint.
That's the answer.
To hold the plasticine in place. Then I build up the texture and tactile on top of that once it's dried, of course, or sometimes even not. Like that.
And the varnish at the end also keeps it together, no?
Hopefully it does.
So, Terry, from the way you talk about art, have you been an artist all your life?
Yes, since knee high to a pencil. I've joked before. Yes, it's very small, very young then.
Yeah, so when you lost your sight or started losing it, did you just try to adapt techniques? Did you go researching anywhere? Did you talk to other blind painters, or was it very much trial and error?
Just trial and error on my own. That was it. There was nobody there. Oh, there wasn't.
Well, there is now. So for as far as we know, there isn't anyone out there who we can ask for techniques to help us. Okay.
Only me.
Only you.
Well, I'm not really sure. I haven't come across anybody else and talks about their technique.
Okay.
I haven't either looked far enough or nothing's jumped out. So this is how I do this, that, and or the other.
Brilliant. And in the video, when you were doing the carpet, you were using your fingers to get the carpet effect.
Front chop, yeah.
Yeah. Is there? Do you use your hands because you feel more connected with the art because you get the better result? Could you use a paintbrush or a knife, or does that not give you quite the same?
I only use a brush when I'm applying the paint, and especially in wide areas.
Yeah.
I use my hands and fingers because I feel nearer to the plasticine. I've tried working with a palette knife, for instance, or something, but I still feel too far away from the actual board, the actual image I'm creating. So I actually had to get in there and get my hands dirty, so to speak.
That makes sense. And you do, or from what was seen, you did all your artwork on the floor. Is that because it's a very stable surface, or? It
is indeed, but I need that upper body strength to press down on it.
Ah, that makes a lot of sense. So you've got more upper body strength if you're that bit higher up.
Yeah.
And I also noticed you making sure the plasticine was warm by putting it in the joint of your knee.
That's right. Yeah.
How long did it take you to come up with that one?
Just one of those things, really. It was either that or the microwave, but this was easier.
Yeah, and I think very early on you talked about if you don't feel the artwork is what you've got in your head, you just throw it out.
More or less, yeah.
Or scrap it and start from scratch.
Yeah, I'm always doing that, really. They're just sketches mainly, most of them. I get so far, sometimes impatience rules. But I get so far it's not going anywhere, so try again, something else. Very frustrating, but it has to be done, otherwise you keep going nowhere.
So sort of a question that goes on from there, I think we might have answered it already, is how do you know what colour paint you use?
Only because I either ask my partner or because I've got a braille label on it.
Yeah. And then sort of, I suppose if it's a mix, it's this is a very light pink or a sea green.
Not that precise.
Not that precise. Oh.
It could be a red or a yellow, whatever.
And sort of one of the questions you came from that about being connected with your art and not liking being a little bit of a perfectionist, which we can all be. When you scrap, do you try and save the canvases if you can, if you're not at a point where you're past it?
Say that last bit again. You're breaking up there.
Sorry about that. When you scrap a piece of art, do you do the best you can to save the canvas?
You mean literally, or the work on it?
The canvas itself, if you've decided the work on it isn't right for you.
Yes, I tried to save it for another day, so to speak. Yeah. And over it again. You can always create. It doesn't have to be an absolutely flat surface. You can create anything with using the plasticine. It can be very old canvas or a brand new one out the packet.
And my last question that I've got here is, how long does it take you? And I bet that's how long's a bit of string to complete an artwork.
As you say. Years you can do. Years. 1 to 2 years, really.
And then the last question we have got for Catalin is, have you measured the effect of the film, and if so, how? And I think you've answered that one as well.
Yes, so through all the screenings and the evaluation of the questionnaires, I'm trying to measure the effect of the film, and I'm learning myself. So if I make the film now, maybe I'll do something different. So for me, it's a learning process anyway.
So thank you so much for both of you for joining us here today. If there are any more questions, can we pass them on to you? If any of our members come up with questions at a later date. I know we've got some of our members who are going to be watching this back at a later date because they can't join us at the moment. thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for your insights. And I am sure we would love to invite Terry down to meet our art group once we can have groups of more than 6 again.
Radio.
Because most of our art people in the art group tend to have some sight, but we have got a couple of members who have none. And it would just be really nice to share. As we said, there's no way of sharing it at the moment. It would be lovely to share that as well. So thank you very much for your time today. I'm just going to go back over to say goodbye to our members. I'm going to mute your sound so you won't be able to be heard by the members, but if you and Kathleen, you and Terry want to have a chat, you will still be there.
Okay, thanks a lot, Catherine.
Okay, goodbye.
Okay.
So, as I said, thank you so much to Kathleen and Terry. I've just taken my headphones out, so if they do talk, I can't hear them. It doesn't distract me too much. So, that was our talk on Terry fragments. If you have any more questions that we haven't managed to answer, do send them to me and I will pass them on, and I will let you know what the answers are. And just letting you know what we're doing next week. So next week we are back in the kitchen with Aisha. I'm really looking forward to it because she's cooking stuffed peppers. And I really like stuffed peppers. So I'm hoping to get a try of one this time. I did get a try of the pizza, that was really nice. So I'm just going to read out what ingredients you need, and I'm going to ask if Ola can type them in. So you're going to need a pepper, one of the sweet peppers, and I should suggest a red or yellow one because they work better. And she says then we need a courgette, a red onion, aubergine, fresh tomatoes, chopped because we're going to chop them, mixed herbs, vegetable stock, rice or couscous. I'm going to hand you the bit of paper in a moment, Ola. And it's about 100 grams of rice or couscous, oil, tomato paste, black pepper and garlic. But if you don't have any of them, it doesn't matter. So we'd love you to join us next week to cook along at our same time of 4 o'clock when we'll be down in the kitchen. After we have cooked our stuffed peppers, or whilst we're cooking our stuffed peppers, we're going to have a little bit of a quiz. And Anna's going to be running our quiz with another staff member, and we will see you next week. So any more comments, send them to me, write them on Facebook, we'll get back to you and we'll let you know the answers. And thank you so much for joining us today, and look forward to seeing you next week. So remember, I've been reminded, like and comment. If you like, more people know about us, share us so that you get more of our members joining us. And if you know someone who wants to join us and doesn't know about Facebook, both Ola and I can go and teach someone in their homes or teach you in Croydon Vision. So not knowing how to use Facebook at the moment isn't a stop for coming and joining us, and just share, even if it's by speech rather than on Facebook. So thanks for joining us. I am going to hang up this time, and we will see